Hi, welcome to today's video. I thought I would take the opportunity, given that we've just moved into June, to do a bit of a mid-year reflection and think about how I want to use my books in the next 6 months. So I suppose a good way to introduce things is talking through what books I'm using. So I've got the Hobonichi Weeks. I'm also in the Hobonichi Hon, and I have a book at the back here which is just a cheap supermarket notebook for my special interest in birds and I guess you'd say ornithology. Some of the changes I wanted to implement as of the 1st of June, so I've kind of already got them in here. So for example, there is a second book in here which I'll talk to you about in a bit more detail. I think something I want to address straight away is the size of my Hon, and it really doesn't fit in the cover anymore. I have another cover that I think I'm going to swap it into, but I think for the purposes of today's video at least, I'm just going to take everything out of this cover, and I think that's going to help things feel a bit more like a fresh start as well. So just going to do that quickly before we get into the video itself. So here we go. I guess this is the stack as it currently exists. I feel like it looks a lot better not in the cover. Part of me is low-key scared about what the last half of this year is going to look like in the Hon. It's already quite difficult to write in. That's one of the things that's informed some of the changes I've made as well. So I think for today we can put the bird book aside. I'm not making any changes in here. The weeks is staying the same as well, so I'm going to put that aside. It really is the Hon that I'm wanting to make some changes in, and do forgive the dust and stuff you can see. I suppose another thing that's quite nice about having this out of the cover is actually being able to see the little spine charm that I made tail end of last year, I think it was. So yeah, that's cute. And then we've got a new book. So at the very beginning of the year when I introduced, well, it would have been last year because of when Hobonichi opens, opens the shop for the following year's books. So it would have been tail end of last year. I'll put a card up when I talked about what my setup was going to be. I described the fact that I had got 2 of the Hobonichi notebooks to supplement the Hon. And the idea at the time, if we just go to a daily page, the idea at the time was that if I ran out of Commonplace space in a month, that I would overflow into one book, and that if I had a lot to say about a specific day and it overflowed from the page, I would use the second book that I got in that set for that overflow. But it didn't happen. I felt weird about just having random bits of excess Commonplace or excess daily entries just sort of flying around in this other book, so I hadn't touched it. And then I was also thinking about how chunky the books got and how I was dividing the pages up, and then how I was also being drawn to decorate, particularly the last few weeks. So the idea of maybe setting pages up in advance, having a theme for a week is something that I really like. But it constantly felt like I was in a tug of war between the Commonplace section and the daily entries in terms of what decoration I put down and how much of it I put down in advance, because I didn't know and I'd struggled to predict exactly what I was going to write about because the day hadn't happened yet. So I wouldn't want to go too full on in the top half of the page and then feel I couldn't stick in a photograph of that day because there wasn't really any space. And there were some days where I could only write a couple of sentences because I'd not left myself, I think here's a good example, I'd just not left myself sufficient room. So my aim with the Hon at the beginning was this idea of the big book of everything, and it was doing a lot. It's been serving me absolutely brilliantly. But essentially, you know, all this preamble to confirm that I'm just going to be commonplace in these hobonichi books, and I'll see how I get on. So I'll show you the first few days of June to really show you how things are looking in the hon now, and then the beginning of me commonplacing in here. So June so far, we've got my cover page, which is like pretty standard. I've got a few different things going on here. So I've got a couple of photos that were taken by Megan of Megan Rhiannon. She's got here a couple of smaller books and like a pile here of a couple of different books like open and on the go at once. And while, you know, everyone's books look different, everyone's setup looks different, you know, here I've got my bird book. I've got the Commonplace going on. So this idea of, I don't know, I suppose having room to spread out and express things as thoroughly and clearly as I want to, was kind of why I was drawn to those particular pictures and why I've been drawn to the way I'm now looking to approach my books. We've got a couple of photos of tattoos here because hopefully this month I'm going to be getting tattoos kind of similar to this in these placements, and I'm excited for that. We've got a couple of Halloween type things because it's rare that I have a cover page without that. So we've got one here, and I think it's a shop in America. Yeah, the prices are shown in dollars, of Halloween stuff in like a seasonal aisle of a supermarket or something. The last couple of weeks, things have started appearing in the shops. So this picture is kind of about like that excitement that I get around looking in the shops for Halloween things. And then here we've got, you know, a tent, someone's camping and they've got their ghost duvet and stuff. So my partner and I and a friend went camping. It's my first time as an adult camping a few weeks ago. And I do like the idea of doing something like that again. Maybe not this month, but maybe at some point over the summer. And then we've just got some lovely animal pictures. That call to nature that I'm feeling, well, I've always felt, but particularly at the minute, I don't know, it seems very strong. And they both have these lovely green tones, so I thought that was nice. We've got a pride flag here, and it says Happy Pride to all those who are unable to celebrate openly and safely. You are loved and seen, which I thought is an important thing because unfortunately, even in areas of the world where theoretically people are free, queer people are still experiencing awful crimes. And then behind here I've got a little bit of a map, which is from some posts from Elle that she sent over to me with this gold disc here. And then my pages, I've taken influence from a few different people here. I think primary influences have been Elle from the Come Corner, Bronte, Chloe, who I think I've mentioned in like my last 3 videos, and when I saw her books in person as well. So I feel like there's a bit of a collection almost of influences here, in terms of how I'm approaching things, and I'm sure the similarities will come across. So, you know, in terms of the decorating and collage side of things and the idea of, you know, I've created a theme for the week with these tapes that I've used. That's very much something that I have been inspired by Bronte and by Chloe to do, and particularly changing up where things are laid out on the page so that things feel consistent but still like quite new in a lot of ways, across the pages. That's definitely something from Chloe and Bronte. The theme I've got going for this week is essentially post it's not a very eloquent way of putting it, but post from Elle plus coffee. So these 2 tapes I got from Elle. Some of these coffee stickers I did get from her as well, actually, but this one here and a few of the others are from Stamped and Sealed Co. And I just think it's nice because Elle loves her coffee so much, to link the coffee in with the decoration, the tape from her. So that's been fun to use the last few days. And then this sort of breaking up of the page at pertinent moments is something that I've kind of lifted from Bronte, and the kind of implementing my interests into my daily entries as well is something that I've lifted from Bronte. So she will colour code her daily entries. I think it's a cousin that she does this in, and you know, I've got my Commonplace colour coding system here with the Zig colour dot pens. So what I kind of started doing here, and this is something that Chloe does a fair bit, I think it's something that Elle does, is the daily entries can be a bit more loose and open, and here's what's on my mind as I write this evening. Whereas my previous daily entries were, I woke up, I got showered, I did this is how work was, this is what we had for dinner. And I think logging the mundane is absolutely fine, and I think there's value in it, but there was a part of me that was wanting to express more, to express something different, to express what is occupying my brain space in a way that was slightly different from the traditional idea of a commonplace entry. So for example, on the second, we've got a pink dot here, which is my code for stationery and writing. And I'm talking about how I'm wanting to approach these pages differently. And then in my entry for yesterday, I've got a grey dot for media and this sort of bluish grey dot for other interests, where I'm talking about something I learned in a podcast about the Titanic and the sinking of the ship. But then I have a line break and I talk about how my friend came over with his dog yesterday. The logging of the weather is something I also borrowed from Elle, and I think she also does this thing where she like puts her priorities at the top. So my sort of weekly to-do list, you know, that continues to exist in the hobonichi weeks, and it's particularly helpful if I'm out and I remember that there's something that I need to do. But I like this idea of what are my priorities, and it also means that I can log priorities that are fun things. So like yesterday, it was hosting the friend and making progress with the jigsaw puzzle that I was working on. You know, that's not the same as take the recycling out and pay the council tax, but they were things that I wanted to prioritise. And I think this way as well, it gives me an opportunity to have just a very quick overview of what was done on a particular day to help jog my memory when I am flipping through pages. Like here today, very much about getting this video filmed, edited, etc. Tomorrow, it might be to make progress on the book that I'm reading. You know, I tend to, once I've done my entry in the evening, look at the next day and think, okay, what am I going to prioritise? And I'll dot one or two things down. And I've been, in some instances, I think, did I do this on the 1st as well? Yeah, on the 1st and the 2nd of the month, I put in a box here the time and where I was, again, something I've nicked off Elle, for my first entry. But then when I come back into the book, I've then also written down the time and the place. I think that's going to be very nice for when I'm away from home. I can very clearly see, okay, where have I sat to write my my journal entry, but also interesting to see what time I'm writing. And the first day I just did it in my normal handwriting, but then since then I've been putting the time in using my stencil. I've just realised I used a small one on Monday and then a big one on Tuesday. I think I'm going to keep the small one just so I've got more space for actually writing. Yeah, I've not written anything in yet. The other thing that I'm going to be implementing as part of this, so you might be able to see, but this is written in like a forest green colour rather than my normal friction pen and the black ink I use in that. I am going to try and give fountain pens a go again. And also I have no idea how fountain pens are going to work in this hobonichi book because some people have had real problems. So I've used the green that I've got which is in a Sarasa pen, because the colour here is a nice green colour, and I like the idea of getting the ink that I'm using for the time and the place to match up with the corresponding like month colour that Hobonichi have picked. And then I'm also going to try just writing my entries in black ink but using a fountain pen and see how I get on. There's nothing wrong with the friction pens. Actually, I quite like the fact that if I make an error I can erase it. But I'm just feeling like a change, and I'm feeling like I'm going to physically enjoy the process of writing things with a fountain pen. Something that's kind of turned me off them in the past, or that I've struggled with in the past, is the mess. But I think if I am approaching it in a slow and I suppose almost like meditative way, in the same way that like tea making, you know, that can be ritualistic. I think refilling my pens potentially could be a nice little slow ritualistic task for me. I think there's potential for me to get a lot out of the practice. So that is another change. My ink and my pens are due today, so I'm hoping to be able to add a clip either now or at the end of the video of those arriving and some swatches for you. We will see. So my pens and ink have literally just arrived. I've laid down newspaper ready for potential mess. So let's have a look at these inks. Okay, so I took some advice from Georgia and a few other people online as well. And I decided my sort of primary pen, the one I'm going to put black ink in, is a Queco Sport, and I've got a fine tip on it. One of the things that's quite nice, it's my understanding anyway with the Quecos, is that you can replace the nibs. So should I get to a point where I do want a change, or maybe, yeah, if I want a change of some sort, then I've got that option. I used to have a Queco Sport in burgundy. That was kind of like my most recent try before this now. And yeah, I just, for whatever reason, didn't like get on with it for some reason, but here we are trying it again. And it does look beautiful in the black as well. I love the black and gold combination. So that's that. And then as part of that advice from Georgia in particular, I picked up a couple of these cheaper fountain pens. These are Jinhao pens. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And the rationale sort of for getting these is, so the main thing that got me thinking about trying ink again, that's cool, was I kept seeing this Deadly Nightshade ink from Cool Pens. It's a special edition they've got, but it's got a bit of a shimmer to it, and Georgia explained that these can sometimes block the nib, so I didn't want that happening with the Queco. So it's a way for me to have fun and play with the more colourful inks, but not ruining the pen. And also, I you know, these were available in a few different colours, but to me it made sense to get them in these clear colours, because then I can see which colour's which. So we've got the Queco Pearl Black, the Deadly Nightshade colour from, oh that's lovely, from the Cool Pens one, and this looks purple in here, but it's got sort of a greenish tinge as well. I am going to do some swatches. And then we've got this one. So this is a Laban ink in this fiery red colour. So I think I picked this up largely because, well, a few factors. Oh God, look how gorgeous that is. I think there's some sort of offer on Cool Pens website, and I was thinking I would want a red, and I saw this Aries one. And I know that in the past, Bronte has had some ink from this collection, so I sort of trust her judgment. So I've gone with that. I think she had a different colour, but I wanted a red because of what I was saying before about putting the time in different colours and that sort of thing. And I feel like a red and a green / purple in this instance, it's like good basics to have. And I also potentially like the idea of like using this to backfill in a very similar way to how Elle does. This red is just absolutely beautiful. I can't stop looking at it. Okay, so let's move on to trying to do some little testers. Oh wow, I don't know if this will pick up on camera, but there's like a skull in the top of the Deadly Nightshade. That's cool. And I wonder how or when the sort of greenish shimmer to this picks up. Maybe as it dries, I'm not sure. As well as these coming in the post this morning, I got some pen pal mail. So I think once I finish talking to you, I'm gonna ink the pens up and read that letter and then reply to it. And I'll do so with the Deadly Nightshade because that's going to give me a chance to really see how it goes. Oh, it's starting to turn green a little bit now. It's almost more of an orange colour initially. So I'm going to give those a little bit of time to dry just before I close this little segment out. I'll come back to you. Okay, so I have owned fountain pens for maybe 10 minutes and I'm already a mess. But the process of getting the inks in was much easier than for some reason I'd like built up in my head. So the swatches are about dry now. I'm just going to write or do a little scribble as well for each one. So pearl black. The Deadly Nightshade seemed to kind of get air bubbles in it, so I've not actually been able to get tons of ink in the barrel, but I don't think that's necessarily too bad. Oh, it's quite a nice vibrant purple. Deadly Nightshade. So yeah, the nibs I got in the Jihao pens are also a fine, and then this is Aries red. Red on the page is a little more orangey than I was expecting. I was kind of expecting a darker ink, but I don't think it's a bad thing. It's still going to be very useful for my purposes. Just realised I didn't give myself as much space as I'd hoped for this bit, so I'm just going to have to do it a little differently from how I've done it the last couple of days, but it's really not a problem. Yeah, so I'm quite happy with those, and I'm going to write my pen pal letter shortly with these as well, I think. Very pleased. Back to the main video. I think, is that it in terms of the changes? Oh, I suppose the knock-on effect to that is, so when I was using this book to Commonplace, I think I'm a little bit behind on it actually. I was using these Calendex pages as an index for what I was writing about when, so I could come back and reference things. I've not done any sort of index page in this secondary book. What I thought I might do is see how I get on without an index. I would come back and reference this sometimes, but not a lot. I've also just remembered that because we're in a new month, I can add another star to this page. So it might be that the remainder of the Calendex pages get left blank. It's not a big loss because I feel like I'm utilising the rest of the book pretty well. Not going to be making any changes particularly to the calendar pages. The only thing I am doing is I'm adding the weather on in this top section here. So much about these pages about my mood, what I'm grateful for. I thought it might be interesting to see if my good and bad days have any correspondence at all, or correlation, I suppose is the better word, with the weather. So we'll see how that goes. And then I'm still using these weekly spreads for health logging. This is last week's. I've not added any decoration in yet. That's something for me to do the next day or so. And yeah, this is this week so far. You can tell I really like this red tape that I got from Elle because I've used it literally like everywhere this week. So that's fun. So that's kind of how I'm looking at using my books for the remainder of the year. The Hon is very much going to be a sort of classic journal space. As things catch my eye or I get new tape or like the inks today, you know, I'm hoping to do the swatches here. And I feel like I always sort of describe this book as my brain on paper, but what I was sometimes finding is sometimes writing commonplace entries, they take a bit of energy. I like to lay things out. I like to annotate something before I then commit it to the commonplace book. Whereas sometimes a thought or a feeling I have about an interest of mine is maybe a bit more ephemeral and I just want to capture it. So, for example, when I was writing about the podcast yesterday, there was just a snippet from the podcast of something that I'd learned and I was like, I'm just going to make a note of it. I'm just going to jot down a note about it. Whereas if I had that information in May, April, I'd have probably thought to myself, okay, I want to sit down and commit to doing a full commonplace entry about the sinking of the Titanic. I want to print pictures for it. I want to do this, that and the other. Whereas really, I just wanted the couple of sentences noted down for myself. So I think this is potentially going to be a really fruitful way of doing things. And then I'll just quickly show you how the commonplace book looks. It's very simple. I've just dove straight in, really. So I'll put this to the side. So I had put, I put some black paper over the book covers, and then they are in a Midori plastic cover. So you can see here we've got the two separate books like that. I've used one of the archive labels from Megan. I think I might put one like on the bird book once it's finished as well. And the idea being that, you know, I quite like the idea of having a shelf at some point with all my notebooks on. At the moment they're in a box under the desk. So yeah, at the moment all I've added is my name and the fact that it's a commonplace book. I've got a key here. I have from Ryman's these like press-on letters, and they are nice, and I often forget to use them. And I thought, well, actually, here's an opportunity, and it looks quite smart on the page, I think. So I've got my key, which is the exact same one as I've got here. So when I am, you know, a chunk of the way into the book, I can just look at here rather than having to flip back and forth. And my first commonplace entry in here, yeah, I've not written anything else yet, is just a passage from Pride and Prejudice. And it is about Miss Bingley sort of commenting constantly on Darcy's letter writing. So colour code wise, we've got grey for media, pink for stationery, writing, etc. And then black for the fact that it's copied text. I've taken this screenshot from the Pride and Prejudice film that came out in 2005, and this feather sticker is from Moren Kunst, and then I've just copied up the entry. And the reason I've made a note in the margin here, so I'm just using a margin that is like the width of my ruler. So again, keeping things just like really straightforward and simple for myself. And my note here that I've written to myself, and my rationale, my reason for writing this up is that I couldn't help but be reminded of this interaction when I was writing to my pen pals the other day. Are my lines straight enough? Am I being sufficiently engaging, etc.? I particularly love, and like I've done Commonplace entries about Pride and Prejudice in the past, and particularly the 2005 film. I particularly love the dry humour of how that interaction is presented in the 2005 film. It just makes me smile all the time. So in my head, while I was writing to my pen pals, I was just had that actor's voice in my head going, "Oh, how well you write," all that sort of stuff. It just made me laugh. And then I've put the title of the book and everything, the source, that's the word, just at the bottom of the margin space, because then I'm thinking actually things will be kind of as compact in here as they possibly can be, and I can keep it nice and consistent as well. So that's me really, kind of updating you. I suppose I've not done that much reflection on the book so far. It's more been a bit more about what I'm going to change and do moving forward. If you want more of like an in-depth flip through or something, maybe that'll be something for next week. Do let me know. Because it is nice flipping through the pages. Just seeing this tip in, that's another thing that I wanted to just note is, as lovely as these pages are from Megan, I think going forward now, if I'm going to talk about a film I've watched, a book I finished, that sort of thing, I think I'm just going to stick it straight on the page. And that way as well, because sometimes I would worry, for example, I've filled a bit of this space, but not the whole page. If I only have 3 or 4 bullet points to make about something, then I don't kind of need to worry about wasting this paper. And also the tipping is then going to be adding to the bulk. So if I've got more or less to write about a book, if I want to spend the whole page talking about it, I can. If I only have a couple of points, then I can just stick that picture in, make the couple of points, move on to the next thing. So I suppose that's another little change. But yeah, anyway, if you did want me to go for a flip through or anything, I'm happy to do it. I feel like I've been a bit scattered today, so apologies for that. Hopefully it's been interesting still. Bye bye, and I'll see you next time. Oh, actually, before I go, I think I might put the book back in this cover that I got from an Etsy seller at the beginning of the year. This way I can put the Commonplace book in as well. I'll see if everything fits. So where are we? June. I have ordered another cover from this Etsy seller for my weeks. I've mentioned, there goes the pencil boards. I've mentioned, I think, a couple of times now how I spilled some fizzy pop in a bag, and the Weeks was part of the collateral damage with that. And although it's not bothering me absolutely tons, it is bothering me a bit. and the risk of it happening again is concerning to me. So I've got that on its way. The person who makes them is in France. So I've got a little bit of a wait, but it won't be long. And I've ordered it in like an olive green colour because I've got this one in black, and I was considering getting the one for the Weeks in black as well. they would go very nicely. But I thought just the green would be a nice accent to it, and also the green will go very nicely with this notebook and like the spare notebooks that I've got that will be potentially future bird books. So here is the book in this cover. It fits better than it did in the checkerboard one. Good grief, look at that. It is curving the other books a bit, but I usually lay things flat. So I think I was going to stick in the I said checkerboard. I meant checked or gingham. What would you call that? I'm really getting sidelined now. So I was intending to use this until like September and then switch back to the black at that point. But I think with how fat the book's gotten, I think the sensible thing is for me to retire this for the time being and then come back to it next year. I'm just going to add this pop mark pin because I want to keep this on this front cover. Hey up, where are you? There we go. I want to keep this one on the front cover. There we go. And the other stuff I will take out and use in due course. I'm going to keep my Labubu here because he's cute. I know Labubu's a girl, but I call mine he for some reason. I am really getting distracted now. I do apologise. So I'm looking forward to the week's cover arriving. Just because then as well it's got a bit of extra protection when it's in my bag. Yeah, that's looking nice, I think. So yeah, I will sign off now. So I'll leave it at that. See you next time. Bye bye.